Tell me what you were like as a 17 to 23-year-old at university with regards to sex.
I didn't go to university till I was 23, but in the years between 17 and 23, I was not in education. I was quite reclusive. I smoked too much cannabis, stayed in the house a lot, lived in the countryside with my grandmother, had a small circle of friends, and therefore, as you can probably guess from all of those things, my dating life wasn't exactly popping off. It was I think I had a girlfriend at 16 and then spent the next 6.5 years single.
Okay, yeah, I read you talking about that time as sort of like an arid moment for you, and I related to that. And I was at university, the place where it's supposed to be happening, and there was so much pressure then. And I think I'm quite like a fun, chatty person, and I really struggled as well. And that brought about a lot of shame as well, because you're supposed to be at university, meeting loads of women, and all these things are supposed to be happening. But I had friends who were also going through the same thing. So what does that say to you about the young dating scene?
I think my problem was slightly different to that in that I just didn't leave the house a lot. And, if you don't go out a lot, the same thing happens to a lot of people during lockdown. Your social skills kind of atrophy just from not using them. Then when you go out, you can make kind of a lot of social faux pas. You don't really know how to behave in a regular situation, let alone when you're asking somebody out. I think university, I think it can be even worse for you when you go into that environment like university where you're supposed to be living this certain lifestyle. You're supposed to be experimenting. You're supposed to be kind of sleeping around. And if you don't know how to kind of conduct yourself, how to ask somebody out, if you're not very assertive naturally, it doesn't feel like there's really, if you don't have a father figure maybe in your life telling you how to, or maybe if you do and they're giving you bad advice, if you don't know how to kind of conduct yourself in that way, how to ask somebody out, it can be very difficult. And it's made even worse when it feels like everybody else is like having sex all the time, but you aren't.
When you've said before that a lot of dating advice is written in such a way as to avoid cancellation, what do you mean by that? And also that I think a lot of it's written by gay people.
Yeah, I think a lot of the... So I'm writing a book at the moment on the manosphere, and one of the kind of early incarnations of the manosphere was the pickup community, which came out of, reached the mainstream with Neil Strauss's book, The Game, in 2005. And one of the reasons that emerged, in my opinion, it emerged on internet forums, basic internet forums in the era of like dial-up internet. And one of the reasons it emerged is because I think mainstream dating advice, particularly for men, tends to be very bad or just non-existent. One reason for that is women, the romance has typically been the female realm, it's supposedly. So it's been, in the past, the pressure has been on women to find a husband. The pressure has been on women to find a partner. Yet we kind of enter the late 20th century, early 21st century, and everything's changed now. Marriage isn't necessarily... There isn't that cultural pressure to get married, which I think arguably is a good thing, especially for women. But at the same time, men don't necessarily know how to conduct themselves in the kind of dating environment. So it's it's kind of, you're told like either you're good looking, either you have it or you don't. And if you don't, it's like, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to kind of meet someone? So I think that's one of the reasons why I think the kind of pickup scene emerged. Like, for all its faults, it came out of a vacuum. And I also think a lot of the mainstream dating advice from men, particularly recently, it doesn't really talk about how to approach someone. For example, say you're in a bar or something, how to approach someone in a way that's respectful, but also assertive. Like, you have to actually put yourself out there. It tells people almost nowadays to like go on dating apps and it will just happen for you. It doesn't really tell you how to present yourself, for example, today on social media. It doesn't tell you anything about how to kind of have good photos, what a good photo looks like, how to create a good bio, and also how not to be kind of too needy. Because one of the issues I think with kind of mainstream dating advice, it's very good on talking about politically correct dating advice. It's very good, and I think it's correct to talk about how people should be respectful of other people's boundaries. How if you approach someone they're not interested, you should apologize, back off, have a nice evening. That's that. You shouldn't be pushy at all. But I think a lot of the people who struggle in this area were like I was. They're not assertive. They're shy. The problem is not that they're overstepping people's boundaries. The problem is that they're not taking any action at all in the first place because they're afraid of, like, almost ashamed of their masculinity, ashamed of offending someone, ashamed of being kind of afraid of being rejected. So I think the mainstream dating advice is so concerned with kind of warning people not to overstep people's boundaries, that it kind of doesn't cater at all to those people who they have a very different problem.
Are we going too far that way? Is there too much offense and fear? I know that, I've not been single for a long time now, and if I were, I would be petrified to approach someone, partly just because I don't want to be rejected, but partly because I might overstep some modern boundary that maybe wasn't necessarily there 10, 15 years ago. Do people still go up to people in a cafe and say hello, or is that now creepy?
No, I don't think it's a bad thing that there are these warnings about, not overstepping someone's boundaries, because there are people out there who behave in this entitled way, will go and, ask someone out, and the person isn't interested, and they'll take this in a very, they'll lash out at the person. And I think women often have to be polite to someone who approaches them because they fear that if they say no to someone, if they reject someone, that person will lash out. And I think, there is a tendency, if you spend a lot of time on social media, where sometimes very shrill activist voices are very loud, I think it can lead you to think, if you approach someone, they might report you for harassment or something. I think, in the right context, I think that stuff is still going on as it always was. Like, if you go out to a bar, if you go out to a club, people are kind of hitting on someone else or just approaching someone because it's kind of accepted in that environment. There is a way to do it and a way not to do it, I think. And I feel like a lot of people, there's a vacuum. No one is kind of teaching that stuff to young men. No one is, there are kind of some charlatans on the internet. There's some good and bad advice you can find on platforms like YouTube. And some of it is pretty decent, but in the mainstream, if you're not going out there looking for it, there's nothing really teaching a young man how to do, the right way and the wrong way to do that.
I keep seeing a statistic about 1 in 3 young men are sexless. Is that something you've seen, and what's going on there? Is that something to worry about?
I know there's been apparently a rise in sexlessness, particularly among men and women, but particularly among men in recent years. I think, partly there's I think partly that's a consequence of people staying in more, not going out as much. People sometimes, I think, again, what we talked about earlier, your social skills can kind of atrophy if you're not putting yourself out there, if you're spending a lot of time on the cell phone, a lot of time online. I think that could be one factor. I also think dating apps are, I think this tendency to kind of compartmentalize different aspects of our lives. So now you're supposed to, if you want to find someone to date, I think, you're kind of pushed towards, just go on a dating app. And the barrier for entry is really low. You just get a photo, just put a bio in. And then, you have these great hopes for, this is going to fix your dating life. You go on there and then, your pictures maybe aren't very good. Your bio is maybe not what it should be. And then you get all of these kind of online rejections. And then you get people, young men particularly, just dropping out of the dating market. I'm not going to bother, or I'm going to wait till I've sorted my finances out, wait until I've sorted out these lifestyle things, and then I'll try again. Whereas I actually do think the kind of a more old-fashioned way of actually putting yourself out there, joining, finding a hobby, finding people with similar interests to yourself, putting yourself in those environments to meet women, I think is better than dating apps for a lot of people. And I also think a lot of us, me included, a lot of people don't know how to present themselves necessarily well online. So you have someone who may have a lot of great qualities, but they're putting these pictures up on the internet, and it looks like they're living in a dustbin or something. It's not. Yeah. For someone who knows nothing about you, they don't know how to put their best foot forward, if you like, online. And I think that's so important nowadays, and it sucks in many ways. Many of us don't want to play that kind of online status game or whatever. But I think if you're trying, and it seems corny and stuff, but I think if you're actually trying to put yourself out there, I think you need to learn the etiquette of what works and what doesn't on platforms like first of all, platforms like Tinder or Hinge or whatever, but also platforms like Instagram as well, which is also almost a dating app nowadays.
Yeah. I wondered to what extent it is. I'm just thinking out loud here. Were we sold a lie in the mid 1900s about this is how you have fun? You go out and you drink until you're blattered, and you're out at a club and you can't hear anyone or talk to anyone, and there's smoky things everywhere, and you wake up feeling terrible. And we were told that's what fun is. But then you speak to people and everyone's like, well, I don't know if I actually had fun. And people are drinking less now, aren't they? And maybe there are other things to life.
Yeah, I mean 1990s, right? Not 1900s.
Yes.
I don't know that far. I can't remember that far back. But
well, I'm thinking back to like starting with Gatsby, and then sort of the big like, we're having a big party.
Yeah.
Everyone's having fun, and people are like, I quite like sitting at home with a hot chocolate and playing a computer game.
Yeah, I mean, I also think it's like I spent some time going out, like actually leaving the house over Christmas because catching up with old friends, and I think the cost of living has got something to do with it at the moment, because you can go to like Aldi and buy a good bottle of wine for like £9 or something. Then you go out to the pub and it's like 14 quid for two drinks, and I think that's kind of part of it. It's the cost of living and how expensive it is to actually go out nowadays. And yeah, I think you have an entertainment system at home. I think COVID changed a lot of this. So I find it's much harder to get some people to come out now since COVID, because they've got into these habits where it's like staying in all the time. They've got these subscriptions they got out during COVID. And I just think people do actually go out less. You see this with like retailers are struggling, like nightlife is struggling, like even post-COVID. I think people got more during lockdowns. People got in this habit of staying in a lot more, doing things online, swiping a lot more instead of actually going out. And I think with the dating in particular, it just does feel easier to log on, set up a dating app profile and swiping. Whereas I think like approaching someone in person to meet them is difficult. It just is. It is like nerve-wracking. It doesn't always go well, and I think it takes like practice to actually be able to do that. And the only people who've advocated that in the past have been kind of quite sleazy, like pickup artists. So.
That's true, yeah. I'm sort of adding, I know it's quite a stereotypical thing for someone who's getting a bit older to do. I'm sort of adding things that we should have learned at school to the agenda. So taxes, posture, and I suppose that's one now as well, like how to talk to and approach women in a way that isn't sleazy and trying to get numbers and things, but just, in a respectful way that is also confident and that kind of thing. I think alcohol must have something to do with it as well. I knew a guy who ran a swingers bar in Canada, and then he set up a second one in Buenos Aires where they don't drink as much, and he just struggled because
no one's approaching.
Yeah, because people in Argentina don't have the same binge drinking culture we have in like Canada, America, the UK, Australia. We really binge drink. And in Buenos Aires, they sit with like a bottle of wine, and they basically sit there like for hours, and they haven't finished the wine yet. And he's like watching them like, come on. And it's like not getting them going. They won't get frisky or anything like that. So maybe alcohol has something to do with it.
Yeah, sure. Like social lubrication.